Hello everyone, here we are with the Count of Monte Cristo, chapter 60, Valentine. On leaving Monte Cristo, Morel walked slowly toward Villefort's house. Notier and Valentine had allowed him 2 visits a week, and he was now going to take advantage of his rights. Valentine was waiting for him. Almost beside herself with anxiety, she seized his hand and led him to her grandfather. She had heard of the affair at the opera and its consequences, and, with her woman's instinct, had guessed that Morel would be Monte Cristo's second, and, knowing the young man's courage and his affection for the Count, she feared he would not be satisfied with the impassive part assigned to him. One can understand with what eagerness all details were asked, given, and received, and the expression of indescribable joy that appeared in Valentine's eyes when she learned the happy issue of the terrible affair. "Now, let us speak of our own affairs," said Valentine, making a sign to Morel to take a seat beside her grandfather, while she sat on a hassock at his feet. "You know Grandpa wants to leave this house. Do you know what reason he has given?" Notier looked at his granddaughter to impose silence on her, but she was not looking at him. Her eyes and smiles were all for Morel. "Whatever the reason may be that Monsieur Notier has given, I am sure it is a good one," exclaimed Maximilian. "He pretends that the air of the Faubourg Saint-Honoré does not suit me." "Monsieur Notier may be right too," said Morel. "You have not looked at all well for the past fortnight." "Perhaps not," replied Valentine, "but my grandfather has become my physician, and as he knows everything, I have the greatest confidence that he will soon cure me." "Then you are really ill, Valentine?" Morel asked anxiously. "Oh, not really ill. I only feel a little unwell, nothing more." Notier did not let one of Valentine's words escape him. "What treatment are you following for this strange illness?" "A very simple one," said Valentine. "Every morning I take a spoonful of my grandfather's medicine. That is, I commenced with 1 spoonful, but now I take 4. Grandfather says it is a panacea." Valentine smiled, yet her smile was a sad one. Maximilian looked at her in silence, but his eyes looked his love. She was very beautiful, but her paleness had become more marked. Her eyes shone more brilliantly than usual, and her hands, which were generally the whiteness of mother of pearl, now resembled wax turned yellow with age. "But I thought this medicine was made up especially for Monsieur Notier," said Morel. "I know it is, and it is very bitter," replied Valentine. "Everything I drink afterwards seems to have the same taste." Notier looked at his granddaughter questioningly. "Yes, Grandpapa, it is so," she replied. "Just now, before coming to you, I drank some sugared water. It tasted so bitter that I left half of it." Notier made a sign that he wished to say something. Valentine at once got up to fetch the dictionary, her grandfather following her all the while with visible anguish. As a matter of fact, the blood was rushing to the girl's head and her cheeks became red. "Well, this is singular," she said without losing any of her gaiety. "I have become giddy again. It is the sun shining in my eyes." And she leaned against the window. "There is no sun," replied Morel, more concerned by the expression on Notier's face than by Valentine's indisposition. He ran toward her. "Do not be alarmed," she said with a smile. "It is nothing and has already passed. But listen, do I not hear a carriage in the courtyard?" She opened Notier's door and ran to a window in the passage and returned quickly. "Yes," she said, "it is Madame Danglars and her daughter who have come to call on us. Goodbye, I must run away, otherwise they will come to look for me here. Stay with Grandpapa, Max. I promise you to come back very soon." With that she ran out, but she had scarcely gone down 3 stairs when a cloud passed before her eyes, her legs became stiff, her hands lost the power of holding the bolster, and she rolled down to the bottom. Morel started up and, opening the door, found Valentine stretched out on the landing. Quick as lightning he picked her up in his arms, and carrying her back into the room, seated her on a chair. Valentine opened her eyes and looked round her. She saw the deepest terror depicted on her grandfather's features, and trying to smile, said, "Do not be alarmed. Grandpapa is nothing at all. I only went giddy." "Giddy again!" exclaimed Morel, alarmed. "I beg of you, Valentine, take care of yourself." "But it is past now, and I am quite myself again. Now, let me give you some news. Eugénie Danglars is going to be married in a week, and in 3 days her mother is going to give a sort of betrothal festival. We are all invited, my father, Madame de Villefort, and myself. At least I understand so." "When will it be our turn to think of these things?" "Oh, Valentine, you can do so much with your grandfather. Try to persuade him to say it will be soon. Do something quickly. So long as you are not really mine, I am always afraid I may lose you." Really? Maximilian, you are too timid for an officer, a soldier who, they say, knows not what fear is, said Valentine with a spasmodic movement of pain, and she burst into harsh, painful laughter. Her arms stiffened, her head fell back on her chair, and she remained motionless. The cry of terror which was imprisoned in Nothier's throat found expression in his eyes. Morel understood he was to call for help. The young man pulled at the bell. The maid, who was in Valentine's room, and the servant who had taken Baroy's place, came rushing in immediately. Valentine was so cold, pale, and inanimate that the fear that prevailed in this accursed house took possession of them, and they flew out of the room shouting for help. At the same moment, Villefort's voice was heard from the study. "What is the matter?" Morel looked questioningly at Notier, who had now regained his composure, and indicated by a look the little room where Morel had already taken refuge on a similar occasion. He was only just in time, for Villefort's footsteps were heard approaching. He rushed into the room, ran up to Valentine, and took her in his arms for an instant, calling out the while, "A doctor, Monsieur d'Avernet, no, I will go for him myself," and he flew out of the room. Morel went out by the other door. A dreadful recollection chilled his heart. The conversation between Villefort and the doctor, which he had overheard the night Madame de Saint-Méran died, came back to his mind. These were the same symptoms, though less acute, that had preceded Baroy's death. On the other hand, Monte Cristo's words seemed to resound in his ears. "If you have need of anything, Morel, come to me. I can do much." And quicker than thought, he sped from the Faubourg Saint-Honoré to the Champs-Élysées. I think I've been saying that wrong the whole time. In the meantime, Villefort arrived at the doctor's house in a hired cabriolet and rang the bell so violently that the porter became quite alarmed and hastened to open the door. Without saying a word, Villefort ran up the stairs. The porter knew him and let him pass, calling after him, "In his study, monsieur, in his study." Villefort pushed open the door. "Doctor," cried Villefort, shutting the door behind him, "there is a curse on my house." "What?" cried d'Avernet, outwardly calm, though inwardly deeply moved. "Is there someone ill again?" "Yes, doctor," said Villefort, clutching at his hair. D'Avernet's look said, "I told you so," but his lips slowly articulated the words, "Who is dying in your house now? What new victim is going to accuse us of weakness before God?" A painful sob broke from Villefort's lips. He went up to the doctor and, seizing his arm, said, "Valentine, it is Valentine's turn." "Your daughter?" cried the doctor with grief and surprise. "You see you were mistaken," said the magistrate. "Come and see her on her bed of torture and ask for forgiveness for having harbored suspicion against her." "Each time you have summoned me, it has been too late," cried d'Avernet. "No matter, I will come. But let us hasten. You have no time to lose in fighting your enemies." "This time you shall not reproach me with weakness, doctor. This time I shall seek out the murderer and give him his deserts." "Let us try to save the victim before thinking of vengeance," said d'Avernet. The cabriolet which had brought Villefort took them both back at a gallop, just as Morel knocked at the door of just as Morel knocked at the Count of Monte Cristo's door. Words were not happening then. The Count was in his study and, with a worried look, was reading a note Bertuccio had just brought him. On hearing Morel, who had left him barely 2 hours before, announced, he raised his head. Doubtless, the last 2 hours had held much for him as well as for the Count, for, whereas he left him with a smile on his face, he now returned with troubled mien. "What is the matter, Maximilian?" the Count asked. "You are quite white, and the perspiration is rolling down your forehead. I need your help, or rather, fool that I am, I thought you could help me where God alone can help. In any case, tell me what it is. I really do not know whether I should reveal this secret to any human ears, Count, but misfortune urges me to it. Necessity constrains me to do so." Morel hesitated a moment. "Do you believe in my affection for you?" said Monte Cristo, taking the young man's hands affectionately in his. "There, you give me courage, and something tells me here," Morel laid his hand on his chest, "that I must withhold no secrets from you." "You are right, Morel. God speaks to your heart, and your heart speaks to you. Tell me what it says." "Count, will you allow me to send Baptiste in to inquire after someone you know? I have placed myself at your service, and with me my servants. I could not live if I did not know she was better." Morel went out, and calling Baptiste in, said a few words to him in a low voice, whereupon the valet ran to do the young man's errand. "Where have you sent him?" said Monte Cristo when he made his appearance again. "Yes. Well, have you sent him?" said Monte Cristo when he made his appearance again. "Yes, and I shall be a little calmer now." "I am all attention," said the Count, smiling. "Well, then, I will begin. One evening, I was in a certain garden. I was hidden behind a clump of trees so that no one was aware of my presence. Two people passed close to me. Allow me to conceal their names for the present. They were talking in a low voice, but I was so interested in all they said that I did not lose a word of their conversation. Someone had just died in the house to which this garden belonged. One of the two persons thus conversing was the owner of the garden, the other was the doctor. The former was confiding his fears and troubles to the latter, for it was the second time in a month that death had dealt such a sudden and unexpected blow in this house. "What reply did the doctor make?" asked Monte Cristo. He replied that it was not a natural death, and that it could only be attributed to what? To poison. "Really?" said Monte Cristo with a slight cough. "Did you really hear that?" "Yes, I did." And the doctor added that if a similar case occurred again, he would be compelled to appeal to justice. Well, death knocked a third time, yet neither the master of the house nor the doctor said anything. In all probability, it is going to knock for the fourth time. In what way do you think the possession of the secret obliges me to act?" "My dear friend," said Monte Cristo, "you are telling me something that every one of us knows by heart. Look at me. I have not overheard any confidence, but I know it all as well as you do, and yet I have no scruples. If God's justice has fallen on this house, turn away your face, Maximilian, and let his hand hold sway. God has condemned them, and they must submit to their sentence. 3 months ago it was Monsieur de Saint-Méran, 2 months ago it was Madame de Saint-Méran, today it is old Notaire, young Valentine." "You knew about it, then?" cried Morrel in a paroxysm of terror that made Monte Cristo shudder. "You knew it and said nothing?" "What is it to me?" replied Monte Cristo, shrugging his shoulders. "Do I know these people? Must I lose the one to save the other? Indeed not, for I have no preference between the guilty one and the victim. But I love her," cried Morrel piteously. "You love whom?" exclaimed Monte Cristo, jumping onto his feet and seizing Morrel's hands. "I love her dearly, madly. I love her so much that I would shed all my blood to save her one tear. I love Valentine de Villefort, whom they are killing. Do you hear? I love her, and I beseech you to tell me how I can save her." Monte Cristo uttered a wild cry which only those can conceive who heard the roar of a wounded lion. Never had Morrel beheld such an expression. Never had such a dreadful eye flashed before his face. Never had the genius of terror, which had so often seen either on the field of battle or in the murder-infested nights of Algeria, shed round him such sinister fires. He shrunk back in terror. As for Monte Cristo, he closed his eyes for a moment after his outburst, and during these few seconds he restrained the tempestuous heaving of his breast as turbulent and foamy waves sink after a shower under the influence of the sun. This silence and inward struggle lasted about 20 seconds, and then the Count raised his pale face. "Behold, my dear friend, how God punishes the most boastful and unfeeling for their indifference in the face of terrible disasters," he said. I looked on unmoved and curious. I watched this grim tragedy developing and, like one of those fallen angels, laughed at the evil committed by men under the screen of secrecy. And now my term has come, and I am bitten by the serpent whose tortuous course I have been watching. Bitten to the core. A groan escaped Morrel's lips. Come, lamenting will not help us. Be a man, be strong and full of hope, for I am here, I am watching over you. I tell you to hope. Know once and for all that I never lie and never make a mistake. It is but midday, and you can be grateful, Morrel, that you have come to me now instead of this evening or tomorrow morning. Listen to what I am going to tell you. It is midday, and if Valentine is not dead now, she will not die. How can you say that when I left her dying? Monte Cristo pressed a hand to his forehead. What was passing through that mind heavy with terrible secrets? What was the angel of light or the angel of darkness saying to that implacable human mind? God alone knows. Monte Cristo raised his head once more, and this time his face was as calm as that of a sleeping child. Maximilian, return quietly to your home, he said. I command you to do nothing, to take no steps, to let no shadow of sorrow be seen on your face. I will send you tidings. Go. Count, you frightened me with your calm. Have you any power over death? Are you more than man? Are you an angel? The young man, who would shrink from no danger, now shrank from Monte Cristo in unutterable terror. Monte Cristo only looked at him with a single smile mingled with sadness, which brought the tears to Morrel's eyes. I do much, my friend, replied the Count. Go. I need to be alone. Conquered by the prodigious ascendancy Monte Cristo exercised on all around him, Morel did not even attempt to resist. He took the Count's hand and went out, but waited at the door for Baptistin, who was now running toward him. In the meantime, Villefort and d'Avrigny had made all possible haste. When they returned, Valentine was still unconscious, and the doctor examined her with the care called for by the circumstances, and in the light of the secret he had discovered. Villefort awaited the result of the examination, watching every movement of the doctor's eyes and lips. Noirtier, more eager for a verdict than Villefort himself, was also waiting, and all in him became alert and sensitive. At last d'Avrigny slowly said, "She still lives." "Still!" cried Villefort. "A doctor, what a terrible word!" "Yes," replied the doctor. "I repeat my words, she is still living, and I am surprised to find it so." "She is saved?" asked the father. "Since she still lives, she is." At this moment d'Avrigny met Noirtier's eyes, which sparkled with such extraordinary joy that he was startled, and stood for a moment motionless, looking at the old man, who, on his part, seemed to anticipate and commend all he did. The doctor laid the girl back on her chair. Her lips were so pale and bloodless that they were scarcely outlined against the rest of her pallid face. "Call Mademoiselle de Villefort's maid, if you please," he said to Villefort. Villefort left his daughter's side and himself went in search of the maid. Directly the door was shut behind him, the doctor approached Noirtier. "You have something to say to me?" he asked. The old man blinked expressively. "To me alone?" "Yes." "Very well. I will stay with you." Villefort returned, followed by the maid, and after them Madame de Villefort. "What ails the dear child?" she exclaimed with tears in her eyes, and affecting every proof of maternal love as she went up to Valentine and took her hand. D'Avrigny continued to watch Noirtier. He saw the eyes of the old man dilate and grow large, his cheeks turn pale, and the perspiration break out on his forehead. "Ah," he said involuntarily as he followed the direction of Noirtier's eyes, and fixed his own gaze on Madame de Villefort, who said, "The poor child would be better in bed. Come and help me, Fanny." Monsieur d'Avrigny saw an opportunity of being alone with Monsieur Noirtier and nodded his assent, but forbade anyone to give her to eat or drink except what he prescribed. Valentine had returned to consciousness, but her whole frame was so shattered by the attack that she was unable to move and scarcely able to speak. She had the strength, however, to throw a farewell glance to her grandfather, and it seemed almost as though in carrying her away they were taking away a part of himself. D'Avrigny followed the invalid, wrote his prescriptions, and told Villefort to take a cab and go himself to the chemist's. He gave the prescriptions, made up before his eyes, and wait for him in the girl's room. After renewing his instructions that Valentine was not to partake of anything, he returned to Noirtier and carefully closed the doors. Ascertaining that no one was listening, he said, "Come now, you know something about your granddaughter's illness." "Yes," motioned the old man. "We have no time to lose. I will question you, and you will answer." Noirtier made a sign that he agreed. "Did you anticipate the accident that has occurred to Valentine today?" "Yes." D'Avrigny thought for a moment, then drawing closer to Noirtier, said, "Forgive me what I am going to say, but no stone must be left unturned in this terrible predicament. You saw Barrois die. Do you know what he died of?" "Yes," was the reply. "Do you think he died a natural death?" Something like a smile showed itself on Noirtier's immovable lips. "Then the idea occurred to you that Barrois had been poisoned?" "Yes." Do you think the poison was intended for him?" "No." "Do you think that the same hand that struck Barrois in mistake for someone else has today struck Valentine?" "Yes." Then she will also succumb to it?" d'Avrigny asked, looking attentively at Noirtier to mark the effect these words would have on him. "No," he replied with an air of triumph which would have bewildered the cleverest of diviners. "You hope, then?" "What do you hope?" said the doctor with surprise. The old man gave him to understand that he could not answer. "Ah, yes, it is true," murmured d'Avrigny, turning to Noirtier again. "You hope that the murderer will grow weary of his attempts?" "No." "Then do you hope that the poison will not take effect on Valentine?" "Yes." "Then in what way do you think Valentine will escape?" Noirtier fixed his gaze obstinately on one spot. D'Avrigny followed the direction of his eyes, and saw that they were fixed on a bottle containing his medicine. "Ha ha!" said d'Avrigny, struck by a sudden thought. "You conceived the idea of preparing her system against this poison?" "Yes." "By accustoming her to it little by little?" "Yes, yes, yes," replied Noirtier, delighted at being understood. "In fact, you heard me say there was a bruchine in your medicine and wish to neutralize the effects of the poison by getting her system accustomed to it. Note showed some triumphant joy. And you have achieved it too, exclaimed the doctor. Without this precaution, Valentine would have died this day, and no one could have helped her. As it is, her system has suffered a violent shock, but this time, at any rate, she will not die. A supernatural joy shone in the old man's eyes as he raised them to heaven with an expression of infinite gratitude. Just then, Villefort returned. "Here's what you asked for, doctor," said he. "Was this the medicine made up before you? It has not left your hands." "Just so." D'Avrigny took the bottle, poured a few drops of its contents into the palm of his hand, and swallowed them. "It is all right," said he. "Now let us go to Valentine. I shall give my instructions to everyone, and you must see that no one disregards them." At the time D'Avrigny returned to Villefort's room, accompanied by Villefort, an Italian priest, with dignified gait and a calm but decided manner, rented for his use the house adjoining that inhabited by Monsieur de Villefort. It is not known what was done to induce the former occupiers to move out of it, but it was reported that the foundations were unsafe. However, this did not prevent the new tenant from moving in with his humble furniture at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of the same day. The new tenant's name was Signor Giacomo Busoni. Workmen were summoned at once, and the same night the few passersby were astonished to find carpenters and masons at work repairing the foundations of this tottering house. Valentine poisoned, and cleared of poisoning the rest of her family, which is good, but we really should figure out who's trying to kill all these people. We're getting so close, you guys. This is all we have left. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.